wild, wild west of name, image, and likeness changing the college sports landscape.
Now things are wide open, and I think that's a great thing for the athletes.
But there's a continuous drumbeat that there are no rules when it comes to NIL. Critics have described the process as chaos.
It's definitely a different day and age when it comes to college athletics from when I played. NIL has taken a huge effect on recruiting.
Some believe new money in NCAA recruiting is leaving elite athletes ripe for exploitation. If a kid makes a mistake, it could cost them their entire career, and it could leave universities in serious trouble with recruiting violations.
The guidelines are very vague and skewed, I would say. I think that ultimately, we all hope for some federal legislation in NIL so that there's an even playing field state by state. I think that enforcement is really critical.
We're diving into the debate, giving you insight on name, image, and likeness, and what it all means for college sports going forward. Speaking directly to those impacted and those working with student athletes to ensure they're in line with the rules and can get their desired payday. Buckle up, NIL is here, and it's here to stay.
Yes, indeed. If you're a college sports fan, you've seen these three letters, NIL, name, image, and likeness, over the past 2-3 years. Those three little words have caused plenty of buzz across the world of college sports.
Yeah, NIL has become the universal shorthand for the ability of college athletes to become paid endorsers and monetize their success outside of school-funded scholarships. Before July of 2021, college athletes were not permitted to receive profits from their name, image, and likeness. Since then, though, a lot has changed.
I'm in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for the 2023 Global Esports Games.
Gamers now seeking knowledge in the name, image, and likeness space.
You have young gamers who are great at what they do, playing video games, but they don't understand the business happening around them.
NIL might even entice high-end players to wait on the draft.
Hey, I can make $1 million if I stay at Ohio State and feather the nest a little bit and then feel like, hey, after another year, I'll be ready to go.
This year is really, we're seeing a lot of activity this year.
Is it over 1,000 players, kids in the portal?
The portal is busting at the seams, and I think a big reason why, it's a combination of things. Now, more than ever, student athletes have choice, and they have the ability to make a move if they want to make a move. They have a chance to put themselves in the portal to see what could be out there from a financial perspective when it relates to name, image, and likeness, even though we know that name, image, and likeness is not meant to be an inducement to student athletes. We know exactly what it is.
Has all of this created what I would call free agency now?
So the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, is trying to come up with and show Congress and to show kind of the court systems just broadly that, hey, we can take control back in college sports, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, do you think the NCAA proposal is too little too late?
The NCAA should have been dealing with this years ago. We're going to continue to have these conversations because there is so much change and there is so much pressure on the business model of college sports right now. We're going to be talking about this for a while, and college sports very well may look different in the years to come.
Oh, yeah. Luke Fedlin, one of the best in the business when it comes to educating athletes, coaches, university administrators on the ins and outs of NIL and where the rules stand now. He's here to provide us a little insight, along with former Buckeye football fever analyst Jay Richardson, 7 years in the NFL, providing a player's perspective to the ever-changing world of college sports.
Yeah, and Jay, we're going to kick it off with you first. You love NIL. Sorry it wasn't around when you were here. But do you see any negatives in this new world?
You know, that's a great question. When I look at NIL in the landscape, I think it's happening fast, Killian. And I think when things happen fast, a lot of things fall between the cracks. So not so much with NIL, but if you think transfer portal, there are a lot of kids that get left behind when trying to hop from school to school. That might be one of the negatives that I can say that can affect a young person's career, is really understanding what the outlook is for for them when they decide to switch schools before they make that decision. And I think that can lead to some turmoil in their future if they don't execute that properly. But as far as NIL, I think that is a fantastic thing for the kids. Honestly, for some of the schools too who want to balance the playing field and want a chance to recruit some of those big dogs. If you look at what Deion Sanders did at Colorado, like that's not going to happen at other schools unless you have a big time guy with a brand and a name and some money.
Luke, we've both agreed NIL is here to stay. I talked with you on a recent trip to Saudi Arabia, which is unbelievable that now video gamers, did they reach out to you? How did that come about?
Sure. So the Global Esports Federation has the Global Esports Games. And what they recognize, these are games that happen all around the world. And there are competitors playing video games. And it is highly competitive. And there is a lot of money in this industry as it grows. So they reached out knowing that just like traditional athletes, you have some of the same problems in esports. And those problems are the fact that you have young athletes who are great at what they do, great at their sport, great at their craft, but they don't understand this business that's happening around them. And when we think about name, image, and likeness at the college level, you have great athletes that are great at what they do, but now they're thrust into this business world that now they have to navigate and oftentimes don't have the skills to do that.
Before we move on, let's hold it there. I wanted you to talk about where you've been this week, today, and because we're at tax time, it's an interesting dilemma, is it not?
It certainly is. It certainly is. So we've been fortunate. Just came back in from Iowa State University where we were talking to their student athletes about taxes and preparing for taxes. I will be at Notre Dame next week with Ohio State, some of their student athletes next week as well. Out at the NCAA as well when they do their elite symposium for football coming up next weekend. So just a lot of conversations as student athletes understand, again, great opportunities with name, image, and likeness, but with those opportunities come responsibilities. Taxes, understanding the law and business is important.
Yeah, the push for more NIL cash is nonstop. The pay for play model is changing the landscape of college sports. Is it fair, gentlemen, that I call it pay for play? Because you and I have kind of winked at each other sometimes in interviews. It's not where it was started. I mean, do you find that evident out there now?
Well, can we have an honest conversation? I mean, it's only on TV going to tons of people, right?
Well, let me tell you that we're going to bring in Brian Schottenstein. He can address that and the way he has worked charitable organizations into his NIL. But what do you say?
So what I say is this. If we're having an honest conversation about name, image, and likeness and what it is, we have to recognize, I've termed it that we have pure NIL and we have synthetic NIL, right? So pure NIL is this idea that I as a student athlete can license or lend for a fee the use of my name, my image, and my likeness to a third party, to a company, to a brand, to do social media influencing, whatever that may be. That's pure. But we also have synthetic. Synthetic is really the collectives, right? And we can think about that from the perspective that they're focused on finding deals for student athletes at a particular institution so that that student athlete can have money while they're playing their sport at that particular institution. That is very much like pay for play, but in a way that is absolutely legitimate, and it can happen through the rules that are now in place with name, image, and likeness.
That's a really good point. And thanks for the clarification, too. I think a lot of people would be interested in that with this ever-changing world. Now, big name businesses and donors have helped players cash in. And as Rodney Dunnigan explains, the university is calling on fans to step up as well.
When we talk about big-time college athletics,
it's a good thing. It's true balance.
Football Fever analyst Jay Richardson says schools like Ohio State need a whole lot of it.
Now things are wide open, and I think that's a great thing for the athletes.
OSU administrators now urging fans to do their part. Athletic Director Gene Smith releasing a recent statement pushing for fans to support 3 NIL collectives: the Foundation, Cohesion, and the O Foundation.
I think it's tough to try to put the onus on the fans to help generate enough, to increase the pots to be able to bring in the best players, but that's where we are.
The cash cow that is NIL is an issue we've been investigating. Brian Schottenstein and Cardell Jones are 2 of the names behind the foundation.
We've had a great relationship with all of our student athletes. We work with their managers or their agents or whoever is representing them for their NIL, and we haven't had any problems at all with any of the deals we've done.
Still the Wild Wild West. it's definitely a different day and age when it comes to college athletics. When I played, NIL has taken a huge effect on recruiting.
From ticket prices to merchandise, fans are already shelling out plenty. Is it fair to fork over dough for NIL as well? Richardson says it's a sign of the times.
College sports has been a multi-billion-dollar industry for decades, so nothing's really changed. The only thing that's really changed is now the people are getting a chance to see kind of all these transactions and a chance to see the landscape that it's really always been.
As schools try to get more creative with recruiting and retention of athletes, name, image, and likeness funding will be key. So if you're a big fan of the Bucks and you want to see your favorite young player in Columbus, you may be forced to pay up.
All right, let's get into it. Brian Schottenstein, co-founder of the foundation, intimately involved in NIL and a charitable component there as well, which is nice. NIL has become vital in recruiting for schools across the country, university donors, fans stepping up, footing the bill perhaps for players to represent their schools.
Yeah, so let's talk about the importance that fans are playing in this new world of sports. So Brian Schottenstein, I'm going to kick it to you first. We are seeing fans get much more involved in NIL. How have you seen them step up to help out?
Well, we really had an amazing month in January. We raised over $3 million in 1 month through the foundation. And the fans, I think, are starting to really buy into it.
Yeah.
They realize the importance of raising money. For us, it's you're helping the players compete on the field, but most importantly, they're giving back to the community. So we have 7 charity partners right now. We just had an event yesterday with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and it's really nice to see the student athletes give back to the community through these charity partners.
Yeah.
Brian, what do you think convince folks to, after they've bought tickets and memorabilia and concessions and on and on and on, to go above and beyond? What do you think? I asked Cardell about this. What motivated them? Was it the Michigan triumphs and rise in recent years?
I think that definitely played a huge role in it. You know, when you see your rival win the national championship, it motivates your program to really, pony up and have the donors, invest in the NIL and the foundation, which was good for us. But now that we raised the money and we're so successful, like now we actually have to win. Like this is going to be a big year. So, I'm counting on Coach Day and his staff. Coach Day has been really great to work with.
Yeah.
He's actually out calling people and fundraising. It's a real big part of it is the coaches, they're allowed to fundraise for the collective. So that is a big part of it as well.
The coaches are.
Correct.
Outstanding. Next is the impact on transfers from the portal. One important figure, new OSU quarterback, Will Howard.
Going to Ohio State and playing quarterback here would be a huge honor and an opportunity that would be hard to pass up. And it was a long process, but I'm glad I ended up here.
The Buckeyes have been very busy in the portal recently, bringing in a ton of talent. I actually spoke with Caleb Downs to see why the All-American safety picked Ohio State when he left Alabama.
40, Caleb Downs on the west 30-yard line. Got about 15 minutes with these guys, folks.
The king of the class is safety Caleb Downs, considered the top player in the transfer portal. Coming to Ohio State was not a difficult decision.
I just love the program here. I love Coach Walton and love what the people had to say around here. I believe in Coach Day, and I believe in this team.
Talent runs in the family. 2-time Pro Bowler and 11-year professional Dre Bly is Downs' uncle. They discussed the move.
Yeah, I talked to him before I committed just to see how his thought process was going and what he thought about my decision.
Name, image, and likeness played a major role in the retention of several frontline players and attracting the top transfers. An informed source told WCHS-TV between $5 and $6 million was raised in the run-up to the new year and the NFL deadline for underclassmen. Brian, what motivated Ohio State NIL here in the last 2-3 months?
It's really good to see the Buckeye Nation is really understanding the importance of NIL. And then what I love about the foundation is we're a 501c3. So every time we pay a student athlete, they have to do charitable work.
Buckeye sophomore Caden McDonald has known Downs since the first grade in Georgia.
Yeah, he might say that he not. I didn't, but I did. I did push him around a couple times, but you know, he a competitor. He gonna compete, and that's what I like about him.
Once in the portal, Downs was a hot commodity.
Recruiting on steroids, I say. I got like 102 calls in one day.
Downs started as a true freshman at Alabama and led the team in tackles. I'd say NIL well spent. NIL deals have become a huge factor in the transfer portal as well. For coaches, recruiting already brings plenty of pressure. You always got to be closing, right? Multitasking to the max, right?
Yeah, and now they have a bit more stress putting their rosters together year to year. So Jay, I'm going to start with you. Coaches are not only trying to recruit guys from the outside, but also within their program. How have you seen NIL play a factor in roster management?
Oh, I think we just looked at it. We just nailed the Ed Reed of college football, basically, and Caleb Downs, who to me is one of the top performers in the middle of the field that you're going to find, and somebody that's going to make a huge impact for the Ohio State defense. This happens because the NIL has turned things into, and between the NIL and the portal, it's become a quasi free agency in a sense in the offseason. And when that happens, players have values. And as a coach once told me, make sure your arrow is always blinking up. And this kid's was blinking bright green. And so he can demand something for that. And whatever that is, he can demand, he received, and he was able to go to the highest bidder. And that's honestly what capitalism is. That's the economic system that we're in. I love it for the players. I know it stresses out coaches to have to put these things together and to have to be a part of something that maybe when they first got into coaching, they didn't know this was going to be an aspect to it.
Not a responsibility originally, but now it's a big
But like
one.
all industries, landscapes change.
Yeah.
You adapt and then you keep rolling. And I think Ryan Day has done a fantastic job of adapting, has had a huge offseason. Yes, it heaps a ton of pressure on the Buckeyes this fall, but that's what you want when you're Ohio State. You want the best players and you want everyone expecting you to go have huge success. I think Downs is a huge idea of what it can be. I think Howard is going to be a fantastic quarterback, and I think that's why we have the portal now. I think things like this make it, what it is.
Pressure, but also a lot of excitement too.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Luke, Brian took a large exception. They don't play that game because they have charitable components involved. Do you think NIL has been weaponized now? We alluded to pay for play. Where do you stand on that?
I think if we're being honest, NIL is not weaponized, right? NIL is an opportunity, right? With those opportunities come responsibilities like we've talked about, but name, image, and likeness, it's not student athletes taking money from the school. They're not at this point, we can have this conversation later, they're not at this point doing revenue share, right? So they're not taking money out of the pockets of the industry of college football. What they're doing now is having the opportunity to be able to make a business decision to say, I'm going to license my name, image, and likeness to be compensated. I'm going to work with organizations that allow me to do charitable work and get paid for that, right? So ultimately, it's not, I wouldn't say that NIL is weaponized. Now, when we start to think about how the transfer portal and NIL can come together, it creates something like Jay said, right? This quasi-free agency that college football has never experienced before. And the challenge with that is that at the pro levels, there's a collective bargaining agreement and there's rules around what free agency looks like. Sure. At the college level, since it's not authorized to be free agency, we don't have those rules in place yet.
Another big question, how does NIL fit into the philosophy of a mid-major athletic program? For a look at that, we're heading down to Huntington, West Virginia.
Yeah, Mark Martin is getting thoughts from coaches there about the impact of NIL from the second-year member of the Sun Belt Conference.
Since his arrival in Huntington, Charles Huff has led Marshall football to victories over the likes of Notre Dame and Virginia Tech, a pair of Power 5 programs. As a former Alabama assistant, Huff knows the world of NIL is entirely different at the home of the Thundering Herd.
Marshall and we have handled this thing probably as good as anyone in the country, right? The last dying words of any successful business is, this is what we've always done. And that has not been the statements made by us here at Marshall. Are we doing what P5, X, Y, and Z school will do? No, but we're doing what we need to do in order to survive and sustain in this new landscape.
Huff feels the key to Marshall remaining relevant goes back to good old solid recruiting.
Our philosophy is we will always replace the seniors that we lose with high school kids. That way our depth and development stays consistent.
Marshall men's basketball is guided by 10th-year head man Dan D'Antoni, who at 76 years young is the oldest active Division I men's college basketball coach in the country. While NIL situations differ for a school like Marshall, the goal for D'Antoni remains the same: win the NCAA tournament.
If you look at all the teams or all the programs that got rated, the programs in the Sun Belt, players got rated probably far more than almost every other conference at the mid-major level.
It is season number 2 at Marshall for former Ohio State head baseball coach Greg Beals. In his eyes, NIL can help herd baseball where players don't enjoy the luxury of a full scholarship.
I'm looking at NIL and trying to find ways where we help our guys pay less to come to Marshall University, or if we can help them pay their bills as opposed to them actually getting paid, that we're helping defer their costs of coming to school.
Regardless of the NIL offerings, Huff says gathering great talent can take teams to the highest of levels.
I'm still looking for Randy Moss, so if you guys see him at any high school, I will go. The Marshall plane has been helpful to us in recruiting. I'll get on the Lamborghini of jets and we will go find him.
Charles Huff, entertaining coach at Marshall. Brian, can you imagine, you've worked with NIL for 3 years. You were on the ground floor and brought this to where it is now. Can you imagine the challenges at Marshall? They're trying to move forward, but you know, the alumni base at Ohio State is ridiculous, and their passion for Buckeye football, I'm guessing it might be a little easier here.
Well, if you look at the mid-major programs, if you look at the athletes, it's actually better for the student athlete. Maybe they weren't recruited out of high school, they weren't the top player, maybe they were 3 or 4 star and they went to a smaller school. They performed well, and then they were able to transfer to another school. We just had a guy come in from OU at Ohio State who's hopefully going to be a great player. But I think gives them an opportunity to continue to grow and go to different schools. But just to be clear, like, you know, the foundation, we don't talk to players that are in the portal or recruits. Like, they enroll to Ohio State, and then we can talk to them once they're enrolled about what we think, you know, we could do for them as far as NIL.
Important clarification there. Mm-hmm. Have you consulted with a group of 5 schools? Is anybody, hey, we need help here?
Well, absolutely. And we've actually consulted with schools at all levels, including HBCUs, D2s, D3s, because the thing is that when we think about what name, image, and likeness is, and this opportunity for student athletes to earn compensation, it creates the opportunity to be able to teach life skills. So when I go in and talk to student athletes, I'm not talking about how they can be a better baseball player or football player or basketball player. I might have some tips for them on the basketball side, but that's another conversation. But what we're talking about is how can we help teach you about taxes, help you understand what to look for in contracts, to think about budgeting and money so that when they leave school, they're in a better position than when they started. And if they make the right decisions because they have the education, whether their money is just a little bit of money that now helps supplement their scholarship, or if it's significant money at some of these bigger schools, then they're still in a better position when they leave.
A follow-up to that, how do you think they're able to generate, or the solution is to generate more interest in those schools when it comes to NIL?
So it's a couple things. One, what you'll find, and this is at all levels, D2, D3, D1, Power 5 and beyond, alumni are always excited about their institution. Right? And so that's one of the things that name, image, and likeness has been really interesting because alumni and fans can get involved in ways that they haven't before. I think the creativity, that's what we're going to continue to see. We're 2.5, almost 3 years into name, image, and likeness. And schools that are D2, D3 schools, smaller schools, they can find new ways to engage with their alumni base, their fans, to do things that are different that they've never done before to help support student athletes.
Quick back to Brian. In the folks that you work with or you sign, how do you think it helps their development to work with charities, to put themselves out there that this is not a money grab for them and there are responsibilities? How have you integrated? Maybe you mentioned some of those folks that you work with.
Well, I mean, I think the charitable side is great. We've helped support over 70 student athletes at Ohio State football and basketball, and they've each done multiple charitable appearances and worked with charities. There's been over 250 charitable touches in the first 2 years, so it's really giving back to the community, and then the charities are able to raise money when they have a guy like Caleb Downs show up to an event with 400 people. You know, you're probably not going to have 400 people go to that event if Caleb Downs wasn't there. And I know you were there, Clay, too, and it was a really great event. So the charities are able to raise money and increase their funding by these student athletes appearing and working with the kids, and that was at Lifetown. So that was a really great event.
It's like a win-win.
Right.
Yeah.
We've seen NIL change shape, change trajectory, change athletics in general. Here's a former Buckeye.
Over the past year, last year it was really intense, just from everything getting released and just being straight to go.
A foundation event, by the way. From TV commercials to brand deals, some college athletes are cashing in all sorts of new ways thanks to NIL deals.
We want to take a look at the checks and balances being put into place to keep students safe, something the athletes, their families, universities, and collectives all want to see. Ronnie Dunnigan looks deeper into the steps being taken to look out for the athletes.
Nothing beats Ohio State.
Making sure they are set on the court and for the next step off the court.
And I've made so many beneficial connections.
Players like OSU volleyball's Sydney Taylor tell us name, image, and likeness is changing the game for Buckeye student athletes and players across the country.
At first, I thought it was crazy.
Taylor wants to ensure the deals are fair for all involved.
It's definitely a big gray area. I think depending on who you're working with, one, you never know, and I think Ohio State has really made it clear, like, ask us for help.
NIL is very new and in many ways unknown. The foundation founders, Brian Schottenstein and Cardell Jones, major supporters of the athletes.
As I started seeing a lot of schools in the South have these collectives, I'm like, we have to have something in place. Yeah, I mean, we've had a great relationship with all of our student athletes. We work with their managers or their agents or whoever is representing them for their NIL. And we haven't had any problems at all with any of the deals we've done.
Still the Wild Wild West. You know, it's definitely a different day and age when it comes to college athletics. When I played, NIL has taken a huge effect on recruiting, and just I think it's all about really protecting these student athletes.
We took questions to the university. Carrie Hoyt says she talks with students frequently about all of this.
You know, we don't have like true insight to what those contracts look like until a lot of them are executed. So I think there have been situations where, you know, we've picked up on some language in a contract that maybe wasn't ideal.
And we are talking about big money. According to their NIL impact report, she believes more guidelines are certainly needed.
I think in our first year it was right around 3.2 million. The guidelines are very vague and skewed, I would say. I think that ultimately, I think we all hope for some federal legislation in NIL so that there's an even playing field state by state. I think that enforcement is really critical.
Athletes like Taylor navigating the classroom, court, and that new NIL landscape.
With NIL, it's super impactful on what we can do in our community.
You bet. In January, the NCAA's Division I Council approved a set of consumer protection rules around NIL. Among them, athletes will be required to report to their school NIL deals worth more than $6,000. This includes terms, compensation, service providers. NCAA also plans to create a voluntary registry of NIL service providers and agents meant to provide a pool of credible options for athletes. A couple of things. Jay, quick to you.
Yeah.
Do you think NIL, should Brian Schottenstein register with some sort of, like agents do with the NFL, correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good parameter to put in place. I think that helps protect the student athlete. You want a database of everyone that's involved with the athletes, that's involved with these money exchanges, so you can get a feel for who's doing what. And that way, if for some reason things go sour, you might want to put a little tick mark next to that particular agency or that company and go, okay, that's somebody. Or if things go well, maybe the opposite. But it kind of creates a database so they know kind of who's moving, who's doing what, and how it's affecting the kids.
Brian, you're right on the pulse of NIL, and Gene Smith had talked about, and others as well, that this might come under the school's heading at some point. You call that institutionalized?
Correct.
Are we close to that?
I think you're going to see some legislation this year occur in the spring where companies like Learfield, which is Ohio State sports marketing, can actually handle some of these NIL deals in-house through the different companies that sponsor Ohio State. But eventually, I think it'll all be institutionalized probably in the next 1.5 to 2 years, where all the schools will have NIL run in-house with the athletic department.
Does that mean you start to get a little sleep at some point?
Yes, for sure. I can go back to my baby.
That's right.
Luke, do you see guardrail structure, governmental playing a part here at some point?
So that's what everybody really wants that are in the industry. Conference commissioners, university presidents, athletic directors, they want to see the guardrails. They want federal legislation. Whether or not that happens, there's a lot going on that Congress is already dealing with. There have been multiple bills that have been, proposed, but nothing's been voted on. And so the question is whether or not the federal government is actually going to move on federal legislation. What we can see is the NCAA to continue to be engaged in the really the regulations that will govern what name, image, and likeness looks like. So this idea, as you mentioned, of having a third party that's going to have an agent registry or third party registry to help student athletes with some level of due diligence and understanding who they may be working with. Those are the things that are going to be important to help provide some guardrails, because ultimately schools want this, families want this, and student athletes want this. They want to be protected as they navigate this space.
Brian, you deal intimately with the coaches, the head coaches at Ohio State. How refreshing would that be for them to, because Ryan Day has talked ad nauseum about this happens, that happens, and it creates a lot of hard feelings. Could that happen, that this could be regulated and the coaches would then not be, they don't know what to do? Sometimes.
I think eventually it will all be regulated, and it'll be institutionalized, and it'll be more formal with how the players are getting paid and whatnot. But the thing about us is we are a 501c3. We're partners with Learfield, so we really focus on the high net worth individuals who are donating to our 501c3. Learfield does a great job at focusing on businesses. We can have business donations as well, but a certain percentage of our total amount of donations have to be single individuals. So there might still be a place for the 501c3 collective, depending on what the IRS ends up doing.
There will be.
But we'll see.
Jay, after that sack on Chad Henne, you were ready for NIL. You were stomping around. Where was your deal?
Yeah, right. I think a lot of guys from my era missed out on some deals. It was really cool to play the video game. And I think people remember this from EA Sports when we were all freshmen and we could see our likeness in a video game. And I thought that was one of the most amazing things. None of us was thinking that, by the way, that year EA did like $200 million in revenue from that video game using every player in college football's name, image, and likeness.
Yeah.
And I think stuff like that makes players from my generation go, man, we kind of came along a little too early. However, most of us are pretty excited for the players because we know what they put in work-wise. We know the schedule. And we know that, for a lot of us, we were going into the couch cushions looking for change to buy, a cheeseburger off McDonald's 99-cent menu when it first hit the market. That was huge for us.
And some fans they don't comprehend.
They can't wrap their minds around the idea that these elite athletes were not being compensated in any form financially. They were just working.
Beyond the scholarship.
Right. And that's fine. But in this new landscape, I think it's starting to balance the scales a little bit. And by the way, no one's paying the kids. The schools are not paying the kids. They're just now having an opportunity to go out there and find money for themselves.
All right,
Business.
we got to wrap it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, and Ryan, really quick, just how have you seen your relationship grow with the coaches at Ohio State, and even maybe their feel for NIL accepting it more?
Well, our relationship's always been good, but now I'm talking to them all the time. I mean, and mainly the conversations are about fundraising. What businesses, what individuals are out there that they think will donate to the foundation. That's a big part of our conversation when we do talk to the coaches, and they've been great to work with, both on football and basketball.
Luke, I'll give you the final word.
Oh boy. Listen.
I think it's what's next.
Yeah. I think what's next is college sports. I think we can all agree is going to continue to look different as we go into the future.
Yeah.
Name, image, and likeness is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We're going to continue to see new and creative ways that student athletes engage. But the landscape of college sports has some other issues that are brewing that are much bigger than name, image, and likeness that we're going to see how those play out as we get into the future.
Do tell.
Well, so if we start to think about student athletes as employees, there are lawsuits that are being dealt with right now on that. Revenue share. So as conferences start to have multi-billion-dollar deals, the idea of revenue and sharing revenue with their student athletes, there's a lot more to come, and we're going to see how that plays out.
Luke, do you see unionizing coming into play here in the future?
That was my question. Not that long ago.
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, Dartmouth men's basketball is actually taking their vote on unionizing, as they've already gone through the process with the NLRB. So very similar to 2014, 2015 with Northwestern football. But now it's a different situation now with the National Labor Relations Board getting involved in different ways. That's going to be something that is absolutely going to be a significant change and different than what happened in Northwestern football, where the NLRB ultimately said they didn't have jurisdiction. Now we think that that's going to actually play itself out, and if that change happens, there are going to be some significant changes to college sports.
Wow. What a topic.
A lot to grasp.
What a topic.
What a topic.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Brian Schottenstein, Jay Richardson, our own guy, and Luke Fedlam, who to me is the preeminent cat on name, image, and likeness in this country. Almost 3 years after NIL rules were put in place, most Division I college football and basketball players are earning some money, with average deals in the 5-figure range, would you say? And some going into 6 figures as well and beyond.
Yeah, proposals are currently working their way through the NCAA governance model that would allow schools themselves to have more of a direct role in NIL negotiations and deals. One thing everyone agrees on is that the current system needs some work, and simply put, just won't last.
We thank our panel here this evening for weighing in. Hopefully we've given you a little bit of knowledge on where the future of college sports is headed. Thanks to all, and get yourself educated, and come see us at abc6onyourside.com and the ABC6 YouTube channel. That's it for now. For the Football Fever and my partner, Kellyanne, let's call it a night.